know how we were going to take questions or couldn't be on, you could always send us questions in advance of the calls, and we are really happy to add those to the chat ourselves. So I want you to know how we're going to make this call work because, and I don't know how many people we have on. How many do we have? We have at least several hundred on right now. And so obviously it would be impossible to have people trying to ask questions live with that many people in a webinar like this. So please know you are all muted other than a few of the staff people here, and obviously Senator Lankford will not be muted. But therefore, we're really counting on you to use the chat function. So we have 2 or 3 staff people here at the center who are going to be monitoring all your questions through that function. And we will be posing those questions, kind of consolidating them, see where the biggest questions are, and asking the senator those questions in your behalf. Many of you know if you've heard him speak, I've never been on a chat with him like this, but if you've ever heard him speak live, he usually gives short remarks and then really wants to hear from you. So I would not be surprised if that's some of the format for today. So make sure you are putting your questions in, and go ahead and put them in now, which many of you are doing, so we can start sifting through them and seeing where the crossover is. One thing I would like to mention right now, and looking at the comments and chats that are already coming in, I know, and I feel for you, and I hope you know the center is here for you. We have a lot of very specific subsector questions, very organizational specific questions that you have for the senator, and or you may have for other people or for us. What we'd like to ask you to do is particularly know that we want to talk about the stimulus bill that will be introduced very shortly, the 3rd stimulus bill. He really is probably, he is one of the boots on the ground, most important senators in that conversation in DC right now. And the reason he wanted to have this call so quickly is so that he could hear from you before he goes into the long negotiations that are going to be happening over today and over the weekend. So really remember to try and keep this, put all your other questions in, because we're going to make sure he gets all of those. But know that the focus of his conversation today is going to be about what you need in this bill to make you be able to do your work. So he is going to join us at 10:45. That's what he told us late yesterday, and I'm sure he's going to do everything he can to live up to that time frame. But in the meantime, we're going to update you on a few other things that are going on at the federal level. And then when that's done, after the senator speaks, we can all stay on the line for a little bit longer and talk about some of the other issues that are going on in the sector as we did on Wednesday. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you for the work you continue to do. Many of you still have your doors open. Many of you are working remotely and doing everything you can to continue to provide services to the people in Oklahoma. So what we want to do through these calls, and what we will continue to do, is to let you hear from local, state, and national officials that are involved in helping us keep people in Oklahoma protected, keep people in Oklahoma served. And we know that you all are the front line to all of that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Billingsley. Dan's on here somewhere, and most of you know Dan, my Vice President of External Affairs, who handles policy work for the center. So Dan, if you would take over and kind of update us on what's been going on with Washington. I know all of you have so many things to keep up with, so Dan's going to give you an update on Washington before the senator gets on. Dan?
Marnie, Dan's having a little trouble with his audio at the moment, so while he gets that straightened out, why don't I give a quick update on that call from that we had on Wednesday, because this is also a good opportunity to just remind everybody that the recording of the call that we had on Wednesday, which included the governor and the Secretary of Commerce, is on our website, and we'll continue to post those weekly updates there. And as we will with these calls as well. So I would just encourage everyone to keep abreast of what's going on at the center's website. And if you haven't seen or heard of that, or you weren't a part of that call and haven't seen that video yet, I really would encourage everyone to watch it. There were some really good resources that were shared that pertain to the nonprofit sector as businesses. And also on that part of our website there's now a disaster preparedness manual for nonprofit organizations. I know it's always a little weird to be doing that, to be preparing while we're in the middle of it, but there are additional resources and suggestions and templates in that manual that might be useful for organizations as they make adjustments during this kind of unprecedented time. And we'll also be making updates there to our training courses and other regular programs that we offer. Although right now we're just really pivoting and making everything virtual, just like a lot of people are. So we're really aiming to keep our classes that we offer virtual and just make that we'll just be live streaming them. So it's kind of an interesting new day here at the center.
Is Dan on yet?
I think he may be coming back in. Let me check in with Jamie.
Okay.
I'll step away from my microphone for a minute. We can just hang out. This might be a good opportunity for people to collect their thoughts and post in the chat with the questions that they would like to ask the senator. So it's okay if maybe we don't have video or conversation for a minute and just let people chime in with their questions and using that chat feature. So I'm going to mute myself and go check in with Jamie on the sound situation with Dan.
So I will just tell you a little bit about what Dan will cover when he gets on. One thing is, most of you know that the second stimulus package was passed this week. And hopefully you have kept abreast of the items that were in that package. It was the Small Business Administration loans. And those of you who were on the call on Wednesday, Secretary Copeland gave us some really vital information about how to pre-register for those loans. So if you weren't on the call and you want that information, go to our website and grab the call from Wednesday, because those phone numbers, websites, and everything need to, those are in the recording of Wednesday's call. And the other thing was some information about, about sick leave that was in the second stimulus package.
Marty?
Yes. Okay, Dan. Great, Dan. Thank you. I just told him a little bit about the second stimulus package and the SBA loans and sick leave. So if you have anything else about that, but you might want to dive right into the third stimulus package.
You bet. I think most of our questions we've had over the last few days about the second stimulus package that was passed earlier this week have been around the Small Business Administration loans and the sick leave policies. We have already gotten a very good white paper from the law firm McAfee and Taft, and that is on our website. You can take a look at that. That will help you navigate some of those sick leave questions that you have if it pertains to you and your policies. It also had some extension of FMLA as well, but we suggest reading that. I think it's probably the best local resource we have on that at the time. Also on the Small Business Administration loans, we're getting more clarity around how that is going to look. That's also going to be included in the third stimulus bill package. I know that Secretary Copeland on Wednesday mentioned some of the processes around what needs to happen with those. We'll keep you posted as we get better resources and an understanding of process to access those. I would also suggest to nonprofits, I know that cash is a very important thing in cash flow. I would be in touch with all of your funders over the next week or two. Be very honest about what your cash situation is, because I do know that one foundation in Oklahoma City will be having a round of emergency grants coming up very shortly. But I also know that funds are set up both with the Tulsa Community Foundation and then in Oklahoma City with the United Way of Central Oklahoma. There may be others that will be set up around the state. But at this time, your most important thing to do is be in touch with all of your funders. To get to the third stimulus package, which is mostly what we're going to cover today and with Senator Lankford, that includes several provisions that will be very helpful for nonprofits. One of the most important included in that is a universal above the line charitable deduction. As we know, in 2017, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the standard deduction was doubled, which reduced the number of itemizers from 30% of tax filers to just 5%. It locked many Americans out of that charitable deduction, and we know that we have seen repercussions from that over the last 2 years. There would be a small universal charitable deduction. It will be temporary, is what we're told. Right now, the cap is $300, but we will be talking with our delegation about the potential of maybe something a bit higher for our donors that would encourage contributions in 2020 to their charities of choice. A couple of other things is a large loan package, and there's about $150 billion available. We're still getting clarity on what nonprofits could do with that loan program, in addition to the SBA loans. But the stimulus package will also be helping individual taxpayers with payments up to $1,200 and then $500 for children. We are in support of that based on what needs to happen over the next several weeks. If your income, and it is based on 2018 returns, is over $75,000 annually, and that's for an individual, then that number of $1,200 will be reduced. And for salaries over $99,000 and some change, they will not be eligible for that stimulus. So that is the main thing that we're kind of looking at today, especially with Senator Lankford. He wanted to hear individuals and their what they're looking for in this package. At the state level, we did hear from Governor Stitt on Wednesday. There's still a lot going on at the state level. At the municipal level, you know, we know that Tulsa and Oklahoma City and some other municipalities have further restricted gatherings to avoid spread of coronavirus. I think for nonprofits, the biggest thing we need to understand is that if you are required to have open meetings by the Open Meetings Act, some of those rules have been loosened to include electronic and telephone voting, et cetera. So that helps with the gathering issue. And of course, one other thing is the Tax Commission will still ask taxpayers to file by April 15th, but they have some on payment. So that's kind of our policy update at this point. Marnie, is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think the other thing that just came through, most of you might have seen on your news feeds, I believe that they have now, and fact check me on this, but they had delayed payment of your federal income tax until they ask you to file by April 15th, delaying any, but you could delay your payments if you owed. And I believe I saw come in today that they are actually allowing you not to have to file until July 15th. If anybody wants to shake their head, they heard that, but that I just saw come in on a news feed when I was preparing for this call, but do double check that. The state also said, and Dan, I was trying to read some of the questions while you were talking, but has, as you know, delayed payment of anything you owe the state. I don't know if they'll come back with also saying that they're going to not require you to file on April 15th. But I mean, I know that's not a business question because we don't file those tax returns, but your employees do, and your employees who were responsible might owe will be happy to have that reprieve. So we are awaiting Senator Lankford at this point in time. So as Janetta had said, probably the best thing to do while we wait is just continue to put your questions in. I have seen some, we have a couple funders on the call, which we greatly appreciate. And I want to say, probably in behalf of all of you who are on the phone, we really, really appreciate our funders. And we know that you're stepping up in a big way during this time. And there were a couple questions from them about how funders can partner with the federal government, and maybe how nonprofits who've never dealt with getting federal grants before, that would be even the Center for Nonprofits, could start getting involved in applying for some of those. I just got a text from his office that should be here ASAP. So it sounds like he is hurrying to get to us. And I do not know, he has not said how much time he will have, but I do know you all are a very, very important sector to the senator. We are a very important sector to the senator. So I'm sure he's going to give us as much time as he can on this busy day from DC.
Marnie,
yes.
I wanted to just let everybody know on the chat feature that we have here, the senator and his staff will receive a transcript of this. So any questions that maybe don't get answered, we might have answers from his staff in the next week, and we will keep you all posted through our resources online. And also we have started a listserv, and we will be starting to send out emails and information with that today or Monday. So just in case your call doesn't, or question doesn't get answered, we will be able to get that to you.
Right. And I believe the senator is on. Senator Lankford, can you hear me? It's Marnie Taylor.
Hey, Marnie, James Lankford.
Hey, so happy to have you on. Thank you so very much. I don't know, I know we maxed out at 500 people, 300 people. So we will be recording this call, but I do want to say the senator has been in touch with many of the business sectors in Oklahoma over the past few days, having conversations like this. He'll probably share some of that with you. But what I want you to know, and I think you've heard from the center all along, is that the senator understands the important role we play in this state. He looks at us as a business sector in this state, as well as providers of essential services. So we are really delighted that he wanted to hear from you today. And Senator, I think you've probably been told, but because we have so many people on the call, we're doing all the questions in the live chat area, and my staff is going to be bringing those questions to you in a vocal way, not the people on the call, just because there's so many, it would get confusing. So with that, Senator Lankford, good morning and thank you.
Hey, good morning to you. Thanks for allowing me to be able to jump on. There's a lot going on here as well. We've been trying to be able to work through the issues to make sure at the very beginning of this that we're dealing with the not-for-profit section of our economy, which is exceptionally important and is a big deal to us. There's no way government can take care of all the needs across the nation. We never have. We've had the importance of faith-based and non-faith-based groups, nonprofits, have been an essential part of our community, and especially of our social safety net. So for me, this is a big issue. So there are a couple areas that I started dealing with right away on it. One is to make sure that any grants that we do for businesses, especially small businesses, would also be available for not-for-profit entities, regardless of faith-based, non-faith-based as well, to just have a blanket connection for them. And one of the primary areas I've worked on with Susan Collins and Marco Rubio is a proposal for small businesses, that is businesses of 500 or less. Depending on the sector, there are a couple of sectors where it's larger, but generally 500 or less, that they would be able to quickly get a 7A loan from a bank, fill out the paperwork. The backstop for that would not be their property. The backstop for that would be the taxpayer, so it'd be an expedited process that could be done within days. And that if they use that loan then for their lease of their property or for their payroll, and they hang on to that for the next 3 months, so that is keep people employed, that would be forgiven. That would transition from a loan to a grant. The target of that is for not-for-profits and for-profit small businesses to be able to keep people employed instead of laying people off and saying, when the economy gets better, I'll hire you back. It is much better to be able to maintain people in that so we can continue on the services and so the economy can restart. Since we perceive this to be something that is a shorter term, that as we get on top of it and slow down the spread of the virus or get treatments or vaccines that come on board, or that the summertime comes, that's the other option that's sitting out there that is the unknown. What happens in the summer heat? Is it like a typical flu virus that spreads, that it dies off in the summer heat? It's completely unknown because this virus has only existed 3 months in our world history. So we don't know exactly how it's going to behave, but if it behaves like other viruses and dies off in the summer, we'll get some reprieve before we fight it again this fall. And so we're trying to figure that part out. With that section of the bill, We do have not-for-profits that are included in it now in very specific language. We're still working through that to be able to edit it and make sure we get it right, but they're definitely included. The second part about this that I want to make sure is small dollar donations could be used as a write-off on taxation. Obviously, all of us know in the not-for-profit world that with the change in the 2017 tax law, that simplified filing dramatically doubled the standard deduction, but it also meant that people that were families under $26,000 a year were not itemizing. And for some, they may have a disincentive to give. Most folks give because they love to give and participate. Some folks also give a higher amount because they also want to be able to write off on their taxes. What we would do in this one is reinstitute a universal charitable giving that individuals could then donate and they could write that off. Now, we have an agreement to be able to get that in. That's language that I have had now for 2 years. The language that I have had is not being accepted as is. They want to be able to lower the amount of what that amount would be. We typically do a several $1,000s of what you could actually donate and write off the top on your taxes. It has been lowered down, but we're still in negotiation trying to be able to get that resolved. But we would have a universal charitable giving amount that gets added into this bill itself. Those are the first two priorities for me. Now we're going through the rest of the bill to be able to look for other areas where not-for-profits could be engaged that are not listed. But if we got access to that part of the bill, we could go back and make the suggestion, this is another area where not-for-profits could be listed. So that's a general statement on it. Our hope is that we can get this bill finished by the end of this weekend to be able to send it over to the House for their review and passage, hopefully, and then to be able to get this on the President's desk as quickly as possible. This is not something that should take weeks and weeks. This is something that will take a few days to be able to finish. So the important thing that's with it right now is it had to have already previously written language to be included in this. If we have to stop and write something entirely new, they're saying that's going to have to wait for another time. We're only dealing with things that were ready. So because our universal charitable giving was already ready, because some of the other areas were already ready, we're able to get those in place. Then we're fighting the fight down the road on the next big pieces so we can get the economic help as quickly as possible out the door. Let me pause and try to take some of the questions that you've got, and I want to be able to hear thoughts and ideas and things. If you've had the opportunity to be able to read through the bill or see sections of it that you have questions about, I want to try to get some of that input as we're working this through.
Dan, do you have some of those ready?
I sure do. Senator Lankford, thank you so much. I know that I've been in touch with many of your staff, particularly over the last 2 days about some of these issues. One common question that is coming up is really about this universal charitable deduction. I know that you are proposing a much higher number for the cap there. Do you think that with your influence, we could get that up past $300? What would we need to do on your behalf to see if we can get the best universal charitable deduction as possible?
So right now it is trying to get a consistent message and then to be able to press other members to be able to do that. Chris Coons is a Democratic member from Delaware. He and I are partnering together on this. He and I were doing some strategy sessions yesterday. I got it in was the first part of it that I thought was most important. It was not in until late in the day yesterday, and I've been pushing and pushing and pushing. I finally got it in with $300. I then hung up the phone and called Chris right away and said, we got it in, now let's get it right. And let's keep pushing. So he can start pushing it on his side as we're negotiating with Democrats today. He's a great advocate on this, and the two of us together to both push the leadership to say we need to seriously consider this and to be able to push this as far as we can. They have our original bill. They know what we're looking for long term. This is not a long-term bill. This is a one-year bill. There's been a lot of push to say we're not establishing new policies that are going on for decades. We're establishing things to be able to work through this year of crisis. We'll debate long-term after this, but folks know full well this is what I want to have long-term, and so I'm trying to establish something here.
Thank you, sir. Another question. This is from Lou Carmichael, who is the President and CEO of Variety Care Health, which is a very large.
Oh yeah, know him well.
Yeah, she is curious about federal grants. Her organization and many others like it are used to getting these grants and understand the reporting requirements, et cetera. Is there a way for a nonprofit like Variety Care to get a grant on behalf of other organizations who may not be able to fill out that paperwork, as in distribute those funds locally?
That is actually not considered in the bill because there's a target to try to get to the individual entity as much as possible. Instead of establishing grants that would have to go through multiple stages, the first goal was to say how quickly could it get out, period. So for instance, this issue about payroll and your lease for your facility, that loan is a 7A loan that's set up. That's already a pre-established process. It is a process that typically, if you're in a preferred lender situation, would be a 36-hour turnaround for that. It is backstopped with the federal government, and so it doesn't require additional collateral, so that makes it much, much faster in the paperwork processing. The other thing that we're doing in the bill is any bank that wants to do the 7A process, even if they're not a preferred lender, this bill deems them a preferred lender because they're not having to pursue collateral. So they can make that process much, much faster, and that way we can get those dollars out the door and directly to that. The concern is, if we get dollars to an organization, we don't have time to supervise that organization to make sure the dollars get down to the next level fast enough. And so the focus is how can we get it to the end user as rapidly as possible. There's also a push outside of the 7A process where any bank in America could do this process. It will take them an extra week to get geared up because they're going to have to establish a system. The 7A banks already have it, but we put this out to every single bank because it's a matter of just filling out the form and then the dollars turned around immediately. Again, it's a loan, and that loan then turns into a grant as long as they keep their payroll consistent.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation. Another question is around the AmeriCorps program. As many of us know, this is one of the best public-private partnerships that the nonprofit sector has. Is there any likelihood of bolstering or infusing money into the AmeriCorps program to work with the nonprofits who are working alongside AmeriCorps?
Yeah, you know what? I've not addressed that yet. Let me go do some chasing. I know a lot of the folks have been pulled back in rather than leaving them out in different communities. So let me do some research on that one. It's a great question, though.
You bet. Thank you. And then one other question that I'm pulling up so far. With many school systems, the state of Kansas ended school last week and will not be coming back through the end of May. And many other states are considering this. I know that our schools are out until April at this point, but is there going to be any type of federal funding to help bolster potential interruptions in schools? So this could mean parents having to homeschool for a while or nutrition aid. We know that there were a number of provisions around food insecurity in the last stimulus, but anything else that the federal government is currently looking to do to bolster education?
Yeah, quite a few aspects actually are education related. Now, some of them you've already mentioned. The nutrition aid has been the first focus to be able to make sure that we're continuing to get food to folks that are dependent on that breakfast and lunch at the school to try to make sure we're getting meals out there. I've had a push for a while on congregate feeding. Several folks in Oklahoma have brought this up to me. This I took as the moment to say, why are we continuing to require congregate feeding when we're trying to tell people not to get into groups? We need to fix this long term, but definitely we need to fix it in the short term. And so we pushed out the issue of congregate feeding to try to be able to fix some of that for summertime feeding. And we'll see if we can actually win that this time. There's also been a a waiver that's been allowed for schools on their testing. That may not affect folks here directly, but every school is required to do some testing at the end of the year. We're giving states the opportunity to be able to waive that, which we assume every single state will, to say they're not going to do end of the year testing on this particular year. So there's quite a few education related elements that are there, but if other folks have other ideas, please send them to me.
One other question, Senator Lankford, and this is coming from a number of nonprofits. As you know, many of our charities work specifically with people with disabilities, whether they be physical, developmental, or psychiatric, et cetera. Any other provisions that you can think of that the federal government is looking at, particularly those who are using Social Security, disability insurance, et cetera?
That's a great question on that. I do not know the answer to it on that one. That was a different working group that's working in that area. Let me go see where they are on it.
Yes.
Again, if there's a particular idea that someone has to say, has this been addressed? Any of that community, obviously there are unique challenges there, vulnerabilities. They're very similar to where we are in the nursing and home health issues, where there's very high vulnerabilities for other health issues. So we have to be able to make sure that we have very limited access to them during this season before we have a vaccine. But I'd be glad to be able to look into that if folks have specific ideas.
Yes, sir. And actually I just pulled up one other question that I think is very important. As you know, we have an incredibly robust philanthropic sector in Oklahoma, and that is both at the individual and foundation or corporate levels.
Right.
Sarah Roberts from the Inasmuch Foundation, Oklahoma City, is asking about opportunities for local foundations to part with you and the federal delegation to attract more federal dollars to Oklahoma during a challenging time.
Yeah. Do they have a specific idea of how they want to do that?
I'm not sure, but we can certainly put Sarah in touch with your office. I think right now what philanthropy in Oklahoma is starting to talk about, and there will most likely be a call next week with Governor Stitt as well, and our funders, but to really look at how can philanthropy react to this in a way, but also understanding that philanthropists are particularly sensitive to stock market changes, et cetera.
Sure.
So as we weather this out over the next 8 weeks to 18 months, what that can look like as far as federal, state, and philanthropic spending.
Yep, I'm glad to be able to have that visit. There are obviously a lot of issues based on just large-scale philanthropy, and want to be able to help in that in every way that I possibly can on it. My first focus on this was to be able to get small dollar donations. Large dollar donations we have coming in different areas. I don't mind raising the cap on that, and glad to be able to see us an increased cap, because those will go to some of the largest organizations and the largest foundations. But I also want to make sure that we're reaching out to the smallest rural communities that have 3 not-for-profits in that communities that are taking care of homeless and feeding, and maybe a church group or faith-based group or something, because those individual areas have got to be able to have some extra incentive for this time as well. So we're trying to get as many different opportunities and for encouragement as we can for faith-based giving this year.
Very good.
Senator, this is Marnie. You maybe have heard, and we're very grateful to many of our private foundations in Oklahoma who maybe gave very specific grants to organizations to do specific work, and have kind of given permission that if you can't do that work right now, or you need that grant money, we'll loosen that up for you to move it around your organization to what's needed, where it's needed most. And there's a question from Jan Perry from the YWCA that says, we have a great concern about grant funding currently in place. Will there be opportunities to have flexibility? So this would be federal grants in the deliverables when services may be interrupted. So as you know, federal grants have very, very strict guidelines. Do you think we could see or ask for some flexibility there?
No, I'd be glad to ask for that. That is not currently in there, but that's a very reasonable suggestion. We have several other areas where we're giving flexibility on deadlines, including, if folks haven't heard, the IRS deadline finally getting pushed back to make that official. That's one that we've been nudging on for a while. They did a delay in when it would be due, but not a delay of filing, and we've been encouraging a delay of filing, and they did that as of today. Everybody sees the handwriting on the wall and when you can get that in, so it's very reasonable to be able to ask for that.
Another question, and since I'm the vice chair of the census for the state of Oklahoma, we have a couple census questions on here. It looks like the deadlines for the census and the timing is going to stay in place. Have you heard about any other just changes around how it's going to happen, additional funding that might be needed during this time?
Yeah, I don't think we know yet on that, Marnie. There's a lot of questions, obviously. I've already filled out my census and completed that. Lots of folks are at home. If they're actually thinking about census, they have plenty of time to be able to fill it out and to be able to get it done. And for any of the folks on the call, I definitely encourage you to get it done. It's cheaper on the taxpayer if we do it early rather than after you get 5 different mailings to your house to be able to do it. But that's one we'll help continue to emphasize. We have already put out on a lot of our social media to take the time to be able to do the census. It's important to be able to get that done for our tracking, but we don't know yet the impact of this, especially once we get into late April, when we start actually going door to door to be able to get it. That's a whole different level, and we'll have to see where we are in the virus at that point to be able to know what needs to be done and if we need to get a delay. But as you know, constitutionally, we have to do that this year, and we've got to figure out how to be able to manage that.
Great. Dan, do you have any others? I do, Senator, there are a few, quite a few arts organizations on here.
Yeah, I was gonna frame a question to you, Haley. One of our subsectors in the charitable sector that is probably honestly getting hammered the most right now are arts and culture organizations,
Sure.
particularly because of they're canceling their entire season.
Especially performance arts.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there also, we have seen nationally a number of artist relief funds pop up and raising a lot of money, which is great from the private sector. And I think with, again, that universal charitable deduction, that will be really helpful. Is there anything at the federal level, maybe with the National Endowment for the Arts, that they might be changing some of their funding guidelines just in the short interim to help some of the cultural institutions with their actual financial losses?
Not that I have seen on that, but they would be eligible the exact same way as every other sole proprietor or small business would be for the grant for their payroll coverage or for their rent. So that particular element of this bill is a $300 billion element. It is very large, and it is designed specifically to be able to help provide a gap through the worst part, we hope at this point, through the worst part of the virus. And so I would encourage all those folks to be able to go through that grant. It's a loan proposal that flips to a grant, but especially for individual artists that they basically have their own business, a sole proprietor is eligible for this the same as everyone else would be. So I'd definitely encourage them to be able to take that assistance, to be able to help carry them through.
And Senator Lankford, there was one other question, and I think because of the populations that we serve, this is going to be very important. Many people, if the third stimulus bill passes, will be receiving stimulus checks. One group of people that I think there's some concern about are those who are on disability income through Social Security. There are some concerns that they may exceed their asset limits and become ineligible, et cetera. Is Social Security going to make any type of changes just for the short term to ensure that those people, even after getting those checks, would not exceed their asset limits, or that check could be excluded from that process?
All right, let me go back and verify that is listed in the text. That's a very good observation. It is non-taxable. I do know that is listed as not a taxable income. It is structured the same way the 2008 checks were sent out, so that people on disability, people that are retired, people on VA disability and such, they're all eligible to receive that check the same as anyone else who had income the year before. The target on it is 18 years old and older. They had to have at least $3,000 worth of income in the previous year, and then they get a check, and it has a sliding scale on it to where once you reach a couple at $150,000 of income, it starts diminishing to a point that it fades out entirely. To say for higher income individuals, it doesn't go. I will go back and check on the asset limits for disability. That's a great observation. Just find out.
Here's another good question. We have an important organization, the Dale Graham Veterans Foundation in Oklahoma. Senator, you might be aware that they are really helping connect. Veterans, people drive into that, but they mention in their question that the VA has some very time-sensitive deadlines, or they lose their monthly compensation. That might be something you could check into. Could they ask for flexibility for those veterans on those timelines?
Absolutely. So let me give you, for instance, something else we're doing already for veterans. If you're on a GI Bill, you cannot do online learning if you're in an in-person facility. So if you're going to the University of Oklahoma or going to OSU or wherever it may be, you're now suddenly shifted mandatory to online, you would lose your GI Bill. In this bill, this third bill we're talking about, we changed that to be able to make sure that we give flexibility on those. So what you're asking about on any kind of time-sensitive deadlines are exactly the kind of things we're watching for to be able to make sure we can correct and get that done as quickly as possible. So please send that in to us and to make sure that we have got that already corrected. But we have several other VA issues that are already corrected into this.
Great, thank you. Dan, Janetta, do you have other ones that we have seen pop up? There is one here from Carlos Johnson, who many of you know is a CPA, and it says if a nonprofit has estimated tax payments, will those, would they be able to delay those as well? Some people do pay UBIT tax on, thank you, no longer on our parking spaces.
Yep, finally, I was about to say not on parking anymore, finally.
Praise the Lord on that one. Other people do pay UBIT. So do you think any of those would, the deadlines on those might change?
All of those should flex the same as the other deadlines. I don't know any reason why those would not move the same as other deadlines are moving, consistent with any other business.
Okay, thank you. That was a good question.
I'd say IRS, as Carlos knows extremely well, he's very familiar with irs.gov, but they should have all the listings and all the exact details on that one, but there's no reason those would not move the same as the rest. And Carlos, I can tell you if you're listening in on it as well, if you're finding an area where you're not seeing that explicitly stated on that, email me or text me and let me know, and we'll make sure that gets done.
All right, Janetta or Dan, I'm scrolling through these as well.
Hey, let me give you a little bit of time as you're scrolling through to look at it. Let me bring up two things about a lot of folks asked me about lately. One is on testing in Oklahoma. This is an area we've worked on a lot. We have a lot more testing going on in Oklahoma than what is being publicly stated, and we're trying to actually get the word out. There are multiple private labs that are out there that are doing testing right now in Oklahoma. The numbers that are being figured are actually with our Oklahoma Healthcare Authority only. That's that 500 number that's out there. That's a very small percentage of the total testing that's happening in the state. And so we're trying to get access to it. There's been a dramatic jump just in the last 48 hours in the number of tests that are available nationally, and we're getting a lot of those coming at our state. So we're finally getting a breakthrough on testing in our state, and I would expect within the next week, we're not going to see in the hundreds, we're going to be in the tens of thousands of testing the capabilities within the state pretty quickly. So we're finally getting a breakthrough for that. I want to let you know that there is some light at the end of the tunnel on getting testing. Now, the next part about once you get a test, and you test positive, now what? There's been some good work on the treatments. There's about 4 different series that I know of right now of different treatment regimens that are being developed. Some of them for existing drugs, obviously for malaria, one of those shown up to be very, very beneficial. That's just switching labels on it, but it's already approved. So that's been beneficial. There's more to be done on that one, but several treatment options are either on their way through or coming through. The third one is the vaccine. There are multiple different companies competing right now for different vaccines. The first of the human trials actually began. As you know, this will go through initial lab testing, then animal testing, and then that proves viable and safe, then it goes into human testing. That human testing has begun phase 1. Phase 2 will be in a couple of months. There is a current push right now to do something we have not done before, and that is if we get into the middle of phase 2 and the phase 2 looks very promising, that the taxpayer, federal government, we would fund the manufacture of that vaccine simultaneous with the drug testing. And so if we end up at the end of phase 3 and everything's viable, we don't have to wait 6 months for manufacturing after that. It's already manufactured. Now, it's a bit of a gamble. It's a multi-billion-dollar gamble at that to be able to produce that many vaccines on something that's not fully tested yet. But we wouldn't wait until it's fully tested and complete and then start manufacturing to try to do it simultaneous. That is something we're currently working through right now to accelerate the vaccine process. It is not, obviously we wouldn't distribute the vaccine until it's fully tested and all 3 phases are done. That we would not do. But we are actually looking very, very seriously at that to try to accelerate the development of a vaccine, because that's the key piece right now for frontline health workers. They're extremely vulnerable to this virus, and if we have a lot of health workers that go down with this virus, we start losing health facilities, and we have a cascading effect across our society. So the primary focus right now is getting to that vaccine as quickly and as safely as we possibly can. I want to just say there is a lot of work that's happening in that area right now as well.
Mr. Lankford, your wonderful staffer Marissa has indicated to me that they need to whisk you off. Any last comments for you, sir?
No, my only comment to this group would be thank you for what you're doing every day. You are stretched. What businesses are experiencing now, you experience every single day, because I don't know of a nonprofit that just rolls around in the wealth. They're all struggling day to day, and they're all trying to be able to work and to be able to serve people. And so I appreciate very much what you're doing. In moments like this, it is 10 times harder for not-for-profits as it is for other entities, because you're already living hand to mouth on so many issues. So thanks for engaging. I know at the speed of what's happening right now and the number of requests that are coming at you, it's hard to stay above water. But if you have ideas and thoughts, send them on to Marnie, send them on to Marissa, send them on to Sarah, or to my Chief of Staff, Michelle. Get them any way you can to us. It will all get to me, and we'll work through this as quickly as possible. This third bill that we're working on this weekend is probably not the last of these. The great unknown on this is for members of Congress. As we know, we have 2 from Oklahoma that are currently self-quarantining. If you get 20 or 30 in the Senate that are self-quarantining, we suddenly get to a point that we get close to when we can't vote. And so part of the challenge we're doing right now is racing against the clock, not only against the economy, but to also make sure that we don't have so many members of the Senate that get exposed to this virus that we can't meet. And so we're trying to be able to get things done as rapidly as possible. There is a plan to do another bill. The unknown is how quickly we can do that, just depending on how fast the virus is moving. So we're trying to get as much done right now as we possibly can to be able to get ahead of that. So that's our target. Please let us know whatever we can do to be able to walk alongside of you. And I am a strong, out loud, constant, consistent supporter of what you're doing, because I've seen it and I know it firsthand and have lived it. And what you guys do every single day really does make a difference in every single community. So thanks for doing it and the way you're doing it.
Senator, thank you for being such a supporter of what we're doing. I know how fast you run in that building, so go run. And you could hear us clap, we would all be clapping. So thank you for your time and your time. Okay.
Thanks, Marnie. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody. I hope you found that as inspiring and educational as we did here. I know, because I've been watching, I don't even have pictures up, I just have the chat up, that there are still so many questions out there. Dan or Janetta, do you see any, because I know you've been looking and talking at the same time, anything that we want to circle back to before we close down the call? And we're not in any hurry to do that. We can stay as long as you need us to stay, but we also know many of you are, as the senator said, we're always working on a thin dime and a short string, so we don't want to keep you longer than we need to.
I just want to say, I know that there were a lot of very specific questions, particularly around operations, especially for those who are in the social services. My suggestion would be download this group chat, take a look at it, and if you all can make sure and network together, because many times one person on one side might get an answer to a question. And if I just encourage everyone to network together to share that information that you're hearing, because as a Center for Nonprofits, a lot of times we hear the big policy issues, but we don't hear about what happens in the weeds. And I know many of you are looking for specific answers. I also would recommend all of you keep in touch with your state delegation as well as your rep and senator in your local district, just because there are also going to be a lot of policy issues, changes, and lifting of regulations, et cetera, on a local level. So I just encourage everybody to network together, especially those within our different subsectors.
Thanks, Dan. I also just wanted to comment that Senator Lankford's observations of how tight the nonprofit sector is. I appreciated his observation that we don't roll around with a lot of money. So that means that when something like this happens, that really does affect our budgets. And so I wanted to let everybody know that there has been posted in the feed a couple of times, but we have a webinar on Monday on the COVID-19 virus and nonprofit sustainability. So if you have some, that would be a great format for you to ask specific questions about how your budget or your financial situation is being adjusted or maybe needs to be adjusted in light of this issue. I would encourage you to sign up for that, and we'll repost in this chat feed here how to sign up for that class if you'd like to be a part of that conversation.
I did have a question that I didn't want to bring up to the senator because I think it is a state-by-state question, and we will look to see how this could be answered in Oklahoma. But as you know, many states, starting kind of at the coast and working in, are really shutting down all the businesses and requiring everyone to shelter at home, and businesses other than essential businesses can't be open. And in Pennsylvania, they actually are calling it businesses that can be stay open life-sustaining businesses. And the question I got is if we were asked to shelter at home in Oklahoma and businesses closed, would nonprofits be considered life-sustaining businesses? I think if I could hear all of you, you would all say a resounding heck yes, that's exactly what we are. But we will clarify that. Maybe we are working, continue to work closely with state government on these issues. So we will clarify if we get to a point like that, and you will probably be hearing it from the state government as well, which of you would be allowed to do business as usual or continue in business, and which of us would be considered non-life sustaining business and could do our work from home. So I just wanted you to know that question came up, but I don't think that is probably a federal definition. I would assume that would be a state definition. Dan or Janetta, I don't walk and chew gum very well, let alone scroll and talk very well. So I
would say there have been a couple of questions on how to access that Small Business Association loan. If you are a nonprofit that thinks that might be something that you want. And we've got a few people here reposting in the feed. I posted a little bit earlier in the feed. Some of that information came to us on our call on Wednesday. So if you find, we'll provide the contact information here, but you also, again, might want to listen to that conversation on Wednesday that really unpacked that a little bit more and went into more detail around that. So if that's something you might want to be interested in, you might want to refer to our recording on Wednesday, on the call that we did on Wednesday.
A couple other things I want to mention, and I think if we let my friend Debbie Hampton speak, who's been through many disasters in Oklahoma, a couple of things that pop up during times like that. This one is, nonprofits that hold out themselves to be nonprofits and are not nonprofits and might be fooling people into donating. Another one is going to be, obviously, we all in our sector who, our IRS, have the IRS mandate of being tax exempt organizations, know that GoFundMe accounts and other places that people give, and I'm not trying to say that those can't be valuable in certain instances, but they sometimes become our competition for dollars, donated dollars. So I would say that we will work, we will keep an ear with the Attorney General's office about anything that we hear during this time, and keep you apprised. But just to keep in anything you hear about anything like that, certainly call the AG's office or let us know. The other thing is, as one of my board members pointed out, while there's the coronavirus going on, cybersecurity and online viruses and things, sometimes we maybe are not paying as much attention or thinking that way because we're thinking about the other threatening factors. So please make sure you're continuing to have good cybersecurity and keep your employees informed about looking for things that could open up your your cybersecurity to malware or I mean, viruses that we don't need. We're going to be doing a lot of work. Everybody's going to be doing a lot of work, you know, through technology. And so I think that's something to pay attention to. There was a question on here about companies that are doing, you know, purification work and in office work. I have heard, because some of you may be using them to disinfect your office spaces. I have heard from my staff that a lot of them are popping up that are price gouging. So someone put on here one that they thought was reputable, but those kinds of things, those kinds of resources, things we might need where you've had experience using a vendor that you know is reputable might be helpful for other nonprofits that need some of those reputable services. Anything else from Dan or Janetta? Because I think we're the only ones who have permission to talk, and
I think that's all for me, Marnie.
okay.
We will, but just want to remind everybody that a recording of this will be available. And as we did with Wednesday's call, we'll aim to pull from it the information that was shared so that people will have access to any of the links or other resources that were available, and we'll put those parts on our website. So I really appreciate everybody sharing. I think this is one of the ways that we just keep each other informed and supported right now. With so much going on, it can be hard to keep up to date with information, and I appreciate everybody's role here in just helping that to happen. So because we only know what's shared with us too. So I just want to say thank you to everybody.
Absolutely. And our next call, as a reminder, is going to be Wednesday. We're going to stick with the 10 o'clock time frame. It just seems to work best for the majority of people. I know some people may have conflicts, but we would encourage you to have, since you have many have multiple staff people, to get one on our call and one on other calls if need be. But Labor Commissioner Leslie Osborne has agreed to be on our call next Wednesday at 10 a.m. So be thinking in terms of questions you're going to have for her. We will probably also be reaching out to Congresswoman Kendra Horn because we might like the House perspective. We just got the Senate perspective, but is this unrolls over to the House, we will probably ask her perspective. Christy just sent me a message that says maybe next week to log in at 9:45, since our capacity is 300, not 500. Yeah. Okay, our capacity is 300, and if we can work with Zoom to extend our capacity, we will be doing so. So anyway, thank you all. Good health. And stay safe, and we are here to serve, and thank you for all you are doing to serve this state. Have a great day and a great weekend. Bye-bye.